in visual perception, we need some elements to see a thing, of course. The first thing is we need a light source. At night, if it's totally dark, we don't see anything. Everyone knows that. We need a light source. Then, of course, we need an object. Perhaps you might ask yourself why this object would be a yellow bus. That's a historical thing, because the first main order for HunterLab was done by Procter & Gamble to measure these American school buses. So we are still using this school bus as an object. And then we have an observer, so a human being. And of course, light is falling into the eye. And so a light is falling onto the object, and then a changed light is coming from the object, and it's falling into the human eye. And then it's important, we have the sensory cells in the eye, and then we have another thing that something is happening in the brain as well. So it's not just a sensory cell thing, but also the wiring in the brain is very important. So these three elements are important to see color. And what we are trying to do now is to look at these three elements one after another, and to find a certain quantification for that, which is objective and not subjective. And that is to the end to implement it into instrumental measurement. So we have these three elements, and we will do the transfer step by step for each element. And now we are starting with the light source. You all know the wonderful natural spectacle of a rainbow, and you probably also know that these colors are created when the white light of the sun is refracted into all colors by the countless raindrops in the air here. And actually that leads to the knowledge that the white light is made of all the colors. So the ideal light white source, like the sun, for example, it's nearly ideal. You can use a prism to refract it to all the colors of the rainbow, as you said. And so we can see that the white light actually consists of all wavelengths. Each wavelength is characterizing a certain color, and all these colors together are the visible spectrum, and they give together the white light. So that's a little bit the physical background here. And if you look at the spectral energy distribution for the spectral curve of daylight, you can see it's not a completely flat curve. It's a little bit, so the relative energy of each wavelength is a little bit different, but it's nearly flat. So it's a nearly perfect white light here. And you can see that's the spectral curve of daylight. And here on the left side, it would continue by the ultraviolet light, and on the right side by the infrared light. And here, the height is the relative energy. So you have a very much energy in the blue lights here, and a little bit less energy for the red parts of the spectrum. So now we are starting for the first element. We said we have a certain light. So normally a light source is a certain light. There are some examples here. For example, daylight, a light bulb, or an artificial light. But already there we have a problem because we can't use that objectively, because daylight is different every day and every light bulb is a little bit different. So we can't use a certain light source to be objective. And to solve that issue, the CIE, that's the Commission Internationale d'Éclairage, so to say the International Commission on Illumination, defined certain spectra for each kind of light source, and that is called the illuminant. So it's not different every day, but it's a defined spectral curve here for the daylight, and it's a defined curve here for a light bulb that's named illuminant A. A daylight is D65. And here, for example, for artificial light, we have a certain curve here, which is referring to the chemical material used for the light tubes. And that's defined here for this kind of artificial light. Of course, there are many more than these 3 examples. So any questions here? It's okay. So these are really objective spectral curves which are fixed here. And here's some examples. For example, illuminant A is incandescent light, and you always also can characterize a certain light by a certain temperature in Kelvin. So that's a black, how do you say, a black radiant at this temperature would give that light. So C was average daylight is an old standard, so it's sometimes used for old standards perhaps, but normally you're using D65 for average daylight, and that's named 65 because it's corresponding to 6,500 Kelvin here. And here we have the cool white fluorescent at 4,100 Kelvin. So these are some examples which are often used. And you might ask, why is the illuminant important? We could use perhaps one illuminant and check everything with that illuminant. Well, you might be right normally, but there's an example. Perhaps you have experienced that already when you try on clothes in a shop and the colors of 2 pieces match perfectly in the shop. It's possible that when you look at them in the sunlight, so the color of one piece might change and the 2 pieces wouldn't fit together anymore. And this effect is called a metameric failure. So it's important to select the right illuminant at which you want to look at the object. So for example, this kind of metamerism, this effect can be found with different materials. For example, the backrest normally of a seat in a car normally is made of a different textile than the seat itself. And so you really need to be careful that, so perhaps it's the right color, the matching color at artificial light, but you really have to check it on daylight also, because otherwise there might be a bad surprise. Then as well, you find it, for example, in pigmentation. Here the surface might be steel with the pigmentation and then wood with the pigmentation, and that might give different colors with different light sources as well. And sometimes you have thermochromic effects. For example, the shock absorber is made of plastics and the hood perhaps of steel, and then at another temperature you might see a different color for another illuminant. So you have to be very careful about that. And just as an example, for a metameric pair, that means at one illuminant, these 2 parts are really fitting. And if I look at this at illuminant A, the upper part is darker or more intense, more reddish. And at another illuminant, TL85, for example, the lower part is darker. So we have a metameric pair that fits perfectly at one illuminant, but gives differences in other ones. So I think I hope I explained it a little bit. So if we look at a light source, the solution is to select an illuminant. So the light source is quantified by the spectral curve of the normalized illuminant. And of course, we have to select the corresponding one.